Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for Masters of the Universe. By the power of Grayskull, I have the power! Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast. My name is Nate, and this is our spoiler-free review for Masters of the Universe. A Ram Man-sized thanks to our friends at Amazon MGM Studios Canada for inviting us to watch this movie early for review. If you're joining us for the first time, we are Geekcentric, a podcast celebrating the world of movies, TV shows, video games, and all things geek-centric. Now, of course, there is no way I could protect all of Eternia on my own, even with the power sword in my hand. You know, I need my fellow heroes by my side. So joining me for this review, he's not just another justice seeker. Nah, he's Justin, the trap jaw shutting, Skeletor cutting Lord of Lasers, aka the one, the only Tall Man.
I like the name. I feel like you used a lot of your He-Man for that opening. Did you? There was a lot of He-Man exertion in that.
I exerted all of my manliness.
It's a mess over there.
Absolutely. But we're not alone. We're not alone, Tall Man, because when he charges into battles, enemies tremble, their bones rattle. With admiration for his luscious lion-like curls, he's Darcy, the destroyer of dark smoke. He's dishing out death right after taking a toke. He's the one, the only Main Blazer.
Awesome. I love that.
Right? You got like a lion.
It's a smoky lion, dude. I love it. Yeah.
He's doing, I think Kevin Smith would approve. Let's get him in the next animated series. Guys, we're here talking about Masters of the Universe. And before we actually get into, our thoughts on this movie, I thought it would be good to kind of talk about our connection with this franchise. Started all the way back in the 80s as a way to sell toys, and has become, kind of a cultural pillar of the toy industry, of the animation industry. So let's kick it off. Either of you, what is your connection to Masters of the Universe?
Yeah, I mean, aside from watching the Kevin Smith animated series, I had nothing to do with He-Man growing up. I mean, the most I knew about it was from the Toys That Made Us documentary about that. And I did some research afterwards because I find it so fascinating how toys spawn such a lifespan for this franchise, basically, and just how it kind of fed into each other was really cool. So, I mean, again, aside from the research and stuff like that, I'm very new to the He-Man universe. So this was a fun experience for me.
Yeah. Justin.
Well, yes, I'm a child of the 80s. I'm, of that generation. So
you're the oldest one here.
I'm the oldest one there. I'm the adult of the group. I had toys that were given to me from my cousin. I watched the cartoons with my cousin. I remember watching the live action movie and not really enjoying it. With Dolph back in the day, again, with my cousins. I spent a lot of time with them, and they were kind of my gateway into so many different things that I'm into now. To the point of what you're saying, Darcy, He-Man is the one that never really stuck. But it wasn't until later, like you said, until you really learn about the history of He-Man and how I think the cultural importance of it, is obviously how well the show and how many people loved it and so on and so forth. And it, went into a movie, but it is the fact that the whole thing was birthed out of toys. You know what I mean? It was a toy, and then it was well, we need a story for these toys. And the story is what helped define these toys and then inevitably create this whole backstory, this whole world, this whole animated cartoon, this whole series of what we've now had multiple iterations of He-Man from comic books to the animated series, like we said, from Kevin Smith, which is probably my favorite iteration of He-Man, to be completely honest, because I think, it has the sensibilities of today's storytelling, but it still kept the nostalgic high level fantasy and that sort of metal vibe, if you will, from the original 80s. And I again, it He-Man, it seems to embrace so much of like even the Flash Gordon and other sci-fi story elements that we know, that's just kind of sprinkled in there, but it is its own thing. And even from seeing this movie, it's clear that fans are excited that He-Man's on the big screen, and the Masters of the Universe, more importantly, is on the big screen, and rightfully so, because it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. I mean, same for me in terms of the Kevin Smith series. Is really the most that I've ever delved into He-Man, though I have really enjoyed the toys, especially the most recent sort of line of toys that have been brought out. I got the big giant battle cat, which I absolutely adore. And I think what I love about the Kevin Smith series, what you're talking about, paying homage to the metal of it all, but also just kind of always, at least for the iterations that I've enjoyed, and we'll talk about it with this movie, focused on the fact that these are toys. Like it's fun to have fun and be goofy and silly, and just remember that these are
it doesn't
toys.
Take itself
and
seriously.
No, the names of these things and the creation of these things, it's like, okay, it's very clear what you're trying to do. You're just trying to come up with, when you got like, if there's like a lizard man, but then there's like a frog man, and they just use the same lizard man body but swapped out the head or something. You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
it's there. All of it is very transparent in some great and charming ways. And so I think that was I think it was great going into this movie with very little expectations. But let's get into this. Let's talk about the synopsis here. After being separated for 15 years, the Sword of Power leads Prince Adam back to Eternia, where he discovers his home shattered under the fiendish rule of Skeletor. To save his family and his world, Adam must join forces with his closest allies, Teela and Duncan, aka Man-at-Arms, and embrace his true identity as He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. Directed by Travis Knight, the film stars Nicholas Galitzine, Camila Mendes, Jared Leto, Alison Brie, James Purefoy, Morena Baccarin, Johannes Hakur Johannesson, Charlotte Riley, Kristen Wiig, and Idris Elba. Masters of the Universe will be smashing its way into theaters this Friday, June 5th, 2026. So let's get into it. Like you were saying, Justin, this world, this series has been translated into, multiple different iterations of there's been different series, there's been different animated series, there's been different movies, video games. You brought up the original 1987 film with Dolph Lundgren. And of course, that classic toy line has also evolved over the years. So I think when you think of Masters of the Universe, you think of big action, you think of lots of color and really imaginative characters, the kind of characters and set pieces that you would expect to see on a shelf, and in the 80s you need to own that. I need to buy that. And you're staring through the glass of the local Toys R Us or what have you. So let's start there. Let's start with the look and feel. I'll throw it to either of you. What did you think of the look and feel of Masters of the Universe?
I really enjoyed the look and feel. Again, they were trying to go for this 80s nostalgic vibe like we're talking about. And I think the way that they brought this world to life through the sets and character design, while the characters were a bit more toned back than their toy counterparts, the worlds you're going through are so like colorful and vibrant. It really feels like a play set, even down to the fact that there are convenient steps everywhere you need to go in these rocky formations. And it looks like a plastic mold or something like that. And that really worked for me. Again, it felt like these were just toys almost that had the really realistic filter thrown on top of them. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the movie's biggest strength is that it fully commits to being a Masters of the Universe movie. It's not, it doesn't try to make Eternia feel grounded or realistic. It embraces the fantasy, the weirdness, the creatures, and the larger than life characters and villains, if you will. There's a sense of scale and adventure and world building that feels very reminiscent to, some of the classic fantasy films that we love. Like, I don't know. I felt like some of it felt like Labyrinth. It felt like, Willow, it felt like, some of those classic nostalgic fantasy films to a certain degree.
Yeah.
In that it's trying to stay within its own confines of defining that world, and I think it does it well. But that being said, I think the biggest drawback is some of the CGI. I think it is it shows in certain areas. There are moments where the visual effects simply just don't hold up as well as you would think, and like the costume design and some of the more focused, like what looks like prosthetics and whatnot, really do work. But it's some of those visual effects that just, it can really pull you out of the experience. But yeah, thankfully the production design and the costume and I guess the overall imagination of the world helps sort of compensate for some of those weaker visual effects. So yeah, it's like a give and take with the graphics and so on.
Yeah, I think a couple things there. Number one, with the characters, and I think oftentimes we think of like, oh, we're gonna get the movie version of character X or Y, and again, hadn't grown up with these characters, so I don't know them like the back of my hand, but I do know what we saw in the Kevin Smith series, and of course, you've seen these characters in and around pop culture and throughout time and in memes and what have you, and so seeing a character like Trapjaw perfectly encapsulated as that character, like the costume looks the same. They didn't do the movie version costume. It is the exact costume that you think it is, maybe not as bright and vivid, to your point, Darcy, but the design is the same. And then as far as the CG is concerned, I do agree with you. I don't think it was ever too distracting, though, only because to Darcy's point, this is very much a universe of the 80s. And so when it did kind of lack a little bit in CG, you honestly, I was almost giving it a bit of a pass, because I was like, this looks cheesy and goofy and corny and 80s, and that's okay. And it never really got to the point where I was like, oh, this looks so rough that I'm like taken out of things.
You're saying that it looking not as great actually helped with kind of grounding it in that like idea of like being in the 80s or a film of the 80s or 90s. I see.
For me, a little bit. Yeah. Especially there's a sequence where like Adam is like flying through space and time. I'm like, that could have just been from the 80s movie and I would have believed it. So
that's fine. It's more when he's like flying on a bike and it's just like, some of those sequences were just a little rough. Yeah. It just looked a little rushed. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because like, I'm all for, being campy and cheesy and, leaning into like bad visual effects for the sake of it, because, you're kind of calling back to that time period. But some of it felt like it was just, there were more rushed animated sequences. But yeah, I think all movies these days will have those moments where they're not going to have the strongest visual effects. It's just a matter of like, do you notice it or do you not? And I think that's just the case. In some instances I noticed it. So
let's just be thankful for all the horrible people on the internet that this isn't a Marvel project, because then this would just get completely ripped apart. But I wanted to talk about the characters in combat. I think the fighting is maybe in terms of the visuals, that might be the best part for me is the choreography is so awesome. I think the way Adam moves as He-Man, there were so many moments where we were just like, oh yeah, like, oh hell yeah, like, fist pumping or fisto pumping, and I think the way they amp up He-Man in those moments and showcase his power and his moves is so cool. But then, bringing it back to those toys, seeing characters fight like Ram Man and Mecha Neck and Fisto. And I literally just wrote down 3 big words in my notes. I just wrote powers, goofy, rad. It really was. It was such a joy to see the combat in this film.
Yeah, again, it's all these characters are based on dumb little puns or jokes or whatever. And again, basically named by a child, essentially, with how simple they are, and just seeing them commit to these powers and understand why a kid would name them that. It was so cool. And again, that's where it felt the toy vibe really came through for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think by extension, they really just simplified the process of naming those toys back then. But the running joke in this movie of how they got their names or how their names are defined is fantastic. And I really do appreciate it. But yeah, the action was great. Like the fight sequences are great. That fight that you see in the trailer with Skeletor and He-Man, it was pretty good. It was pretty good to see on the big screen, and there's other moments with He-Man, like you said, Nate, that are absolutely fantastic. I want to quickly shout out the score
Yeah.
from Daniel Pemberton. I think this is like, I think the score is doing a ton of heavy lifting for this movie in terms of like, from a nostalgic standpoint, from an emotion standpoint. I think it gives the movie its energy, its emotional part, and it's just adding to, like I was saying, those like larger than life heroic feelings, and it's just feeding into that nostalgia with its it's what 80s metal vibes, like
80s
what's
synth rock and metal.
synth rock. What's the one that like is it like hair, they call it hair metal,
glam
or
metal and hair metal,
glam metal? There's some glam
and hair
metal,
yeah.
There's some glam and hair metal, but then it knows when to like to adjust for like maybe something a little bit emotional. You still hear that like that hint of that theme in there, but then it ramps back up into this full metal, and it's definitely one of the major highlights to the feel of this movie.
Yeah, I want to throw it to Darcy in a second, but I wanted to just jump in and say the two words. All I'm going to do is just write 3 or 4 words per point that I want to make going forward. But the two words,
save a lot of time that way.
I know, right? It'd be a much shorter podcast. Thank goodness. No, but I will say, like, Daniel Pemberton's killing it. The drama, Project Hail Mary was incredible. And now this movie, and the two words that just kept coming to mind every time we get into that big theme or we get into a big action moment, and the score is popping off, is just hell yeah. Like it just that's the best summation of this score. We listened to the main theme, whatever they released, on our drive home, and I just wanted to listen to it over and over and over again. And Darcy, you would actually notice something in the credits that you were popping off for. What was going on with that?
Well, Daniel Pemberton didn't do the whole thing on his own. He actually was assisted by Brian May for most of the guitar parts throughout the score. So legendary guitarist of Queen came in and just laid his incredible guitar skills over top of everything. And that's, I think, what really drives or makes this score so alive, is that he was an epic guitarist in the 80s. So of course he knows how to capture that vibe again. And he just committed to it and just brought Daniel's score up to the next level with his guitars. So it was, again, those moments are just so much more epic because of the little soloing in the background and stuff like that. Loved it.
So good. Let's talk about the cast of characters, the performances as well. We got Nicholas Galatzine as Prince Adam Glenn / He-Man. Let's start there. I'm going to throw it to you, Justin. What did you think of Prince Adam, He-Man, in this movie?
Yeah, I think the film like wisely makes Adam the emotional center of the story in the best possible way. I think rather than focusing solely on just He-Man as the strongest man in the universe, it spends time exploring who Adam is and the sort of struggles that he's going through. And I think Nicholas kind of embodied that really, really well. And I think he gave us a very uncommon or unlikely adaptation. That's obviously rooted in the writing and the story and so on and so forth. But I do think that he brought the best parts of He-Man, but he also brought some new parts to it. The strength comes from his empathy, his compassion, and his just willingness to put others before him. And I think that is something that is kind of built into He-Man and built into Prince Adam. But like, He-Man back in the day represented something entirely different, and I think is just as a sense of masculinity. And here there's just sort of there's still that masculinity, but there's also a deconstruction of that as well. And I think, again, Nicholas just embodies that, showing all sides of what masculinity looks like in this day and age. It was a very modernized approach to humanizing Prince Adam in a way that I thought was very genuine. And I think his performance, it resonated with me. I thought he was definitely one of the best parts of this film.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. He was, again, the unconventional He-Man that we didn't know we needed, because, again, like you said, it goes against everything that He-Man stood for, which was the most masculine thing you could think of. And now, with the way masculinity is looking nowadays and all that stuff, it's a really cool approach to modernize what it means to be He-Man. So I think he did a really good job, and considering I haven't seen him in anything else, this is an incredible first performance for me to witness, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else he goes on to do, because I think he's got some real depth and could go on to tell some really cool stories.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of this movie, we see a younger version of Adam, played by R.D. Wilkinson Hunt, and when we catch up with older Adam, I think Nicholas, to your point, Justin, has this great sort of youthful, almost childlike energy about him, and so some of the
Mhm.
ways that, I mean, again, it is in the dialogue, it is in the writing, but some of the ways that he's delivering these lines, you're like, this is the same little kid that we just saw during the opening of this film. And I think he really delivered on playing that character with heart as a character that you want to root for. Of course, he's not the only one. Camila Mendez as Tila comes in, joins him as just the one of the most incredible badassery characters in this movie, rushing us into the adventure. I'll throw it to either of you. What did you think of Camila Mendez's Tila?
I really liked her. Again, she did a great job with what she was giving. I feel like her character was kind of just there to be the muscle, but I mean, it worked for me in a lot of situations. So I think it was she did a great job bringing this character to life. And again, I have no connection to anything really involving her, so I don't have much to go on. But I really enjoyed what she did with the character, or at least what she was giving in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think in this story, she's juxtaposing Adam in a lot of ways, right? Where Adam is very, trying to find the man inside of him, and I use air quotes around that because everyone's just expecting him to be this this superhero, if you will, because of his legacy and so on. Camilla embraces Tila in a way that is, she is the muscle, she is the strength. I think I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from her and her character. I think they were kind of weaving to kind of show us a little bit more of that emotion between her and her father. uh, I don't know if that kind of really, that sort of felt forced at times to kind of show that
it
there's
didn't fully pay off. You're right.
exactly, and I don't think it fully paid off. And yeah, I think she was great though. I would have liked to seen more of her. And who knows? This is obviously the idea of a Masters of the Universe. There's probably more that they would want to do. So there's probably going to be more of her story to explore. But here it just felt like you said, Darcy, she was the muscle. She was kind of like the juxtaposition to Adam in a lot of ways.
And I feel like a lot of and we'll probably touch on this on story a little bit, but a lot of this movie, it is an origin story, right? For the most part. So
For the most
the
part,
idea
yeah.
that, right? So the idea that this character of Tila is sort of sidelined. It's like, well, they only have so much they can do because they do have to include all this origin and all this backstory. And so, like you're saying, Justin, I do really hope we get more of her in the future along with other characters, but we can't ignore the big old skeleton in the room, the skeleton of Jared Leto on screen. This was one that I think we were kind of nervous about, but Darcy, let me know. Jared Leto, Skeletor, what'd you think?
Fantastic. I think my favorite part of the movie was Skeletor this time around, just because while he's still the butt of the joke and is just a giant joke, like what I've come to realize he is across most storytelling things.
Wait. Jared Leto or Skeletor? Who's the butt of the joke?
Oh, sorry, Skeletor. But so yeah, the theatricality that Jared Leto brought to this this iteration of Skeletor was fantastic, and then just the voice he chose to go with was the polar opposite of the high pitched Mark Hamill stuff that I'm at least familiar with. So it was a really cool direction that made it stand on its own, and I think it really worked. And just again, the cheesiness and hamminess and just Skeletor of it all worked so well with this, combination.
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jared Leto is fantastic in this. I think, he goes big, and whether people love his performance or not, he fully commits to it, like you were saying, and I think it's the right tone for the movie. And he created something very memorable. Like we were saying this on the ride home, but I can't think. And maybe it's just me because I can't think, but I can't think of a role where Jared Leto was somewhat comical. Like he showed glimpses maybe with a Depeche Mode scene in Tron Ares.
Was he funny as the Joker? I never watched that one. Was he funny as the Joker?
He wasn't funny.
He was weird. He was
weird.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if that was it. I think the advantage too is that his face isn't in it. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that he can kind of set himself free, and, they didn't find a way to try to do a an Audrey Plaza death style sort of thing for his face, where it's partially his face, but it's also a skull.
Or
You know what I
like,
mean?
or
Like
like they show like him before he
before
became the
he
skeleton.
came skeleton. Yeah, like just to kind of establish, that's Jared Leto, just so you know.
Right.
But also like he's been totally like absent through all of the press, so I'm not sure
There's some
why.
stuff that I don't know. There's some stuff going on with Jared Leto. Apparently.
Okay, but anyways, he should be proud of this performance, because I think he brought something that was just the right amount of refreshingly different, with the right amount of what you would know from the character in terms of like the theatrics and the sort of the weird comedy of the character. And to your point, Darcy, the voice worked. I think it did great in terms of really establishing a different tone. So and there's a sequence in there that definitely had me laughing towards the end of the movie, and it was gold. So I think he was great. I was surprised.
The only thing I read about Jared Leto and his thoughts on his performance as Skeletor is that he actually apparently thought that he was disappointed in his performance as Skeletor. So I think going forward, if we want to know whether it's going to be a good or bad Jared Leto character or role or performance, is just if he thinks the opposite of it. So I think going forward, because normally whenever I've heard him talk about his, he's like really getting into it and all this stuff. So, we just watched The Mandalorian and Grogu, and Darcy, you and I talked about how we would have loved to have seen more of Pedro Pascal's face in that movie. And Justin, you're absolutely right. I'm so happy that we didn't get to. And he's not a Mark Hamill, like you're saying. He's not an Alan Oppenheimer. He's still given that goofy, silly boob voice at times, and I think they did such a job. And I also want to shout out the CG artists that worked on his face to give it so much emotion in a skeleton and a skull. Again, harkening back to the animated side of the character so much, and really kind of giving those silly, goofy, those expressions of surprise when he's about to get slapped in the face. And then I also want to shout out Barry Gower, who did the prosthetics and makeup in this movie, because I think ultimately this was a really awesome iteration of the character, like you're saying, Darcy. I'm glad it was a highlight for you. A highlight for me that I was hoping to see more of was Alison Brie as Evelyn. I was, I didn't have a ton of expectations for this movie, but knowing that Alison Brie was going to be in this movie, she wasn't given a lot to do. And I really enjoyed her when we had her on screen as Evelyn. Like, I think she's the perfect casting, and I think she nailed the character. But like, at least one scene of her chewing up the room would have been very rewarding, I think, especially in a cast of such colorful characters. Yeah. But I want to throw it to you two. Was there anyone else that you wanted to bring up and chat about?
I mean, I really enjoyed Man at Arms this time around. The Idris Elba maybe playing another iteration of another Idris Elba character, but he does it well. Like, I enjoyed it. The jokes worked when they were coming from him, and just his whole demeanor and mentality throughout the movie just really worked for me. And while we didn't get a lot of depth from his character, it felt forced when they were trying to make him grow. I still enjoyed his humor or his presence throughout the movie.
And I think his character served a purpose in, again, kind of being a parallel to Adam's journey, right? In a different way. That you can when you see the movie, you'll see, the sort of conflicts and the things that are eating up Duncan. They kind of are the same things that are eating up Adam to a certain degree, but just in a different way. And I think that they played off of each other really, really well. And I like you said, Darcy, like Idris he's a well-known actor. He has a persona to him of how he portrays it. If you took him out and you put like someone like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, like, what are you going to get from that? Right. Like, you would have gotten The Rock as, the Man of Arms, right? As, you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Right. So like, but like, I think Idris
The
obviously
Rock is Ram Man or Rock Man, maybe. That might have been great.
Sure. But like, I think what Idris does is he does lean into some of the more emotional stuff. But again, going back to the whole story with Tila and Camille, I just don't think that was as fleshed out as it could have been, because it didn't really amount to anything, and it ended up just becoming more about Duncan trying to prove something to himself and to everyone around him in a lot of ways. But yeah, he was great. I think the cast like everyone that was in this, the cast generally understood the assignment. Nobody
Absolutely.
feels embarrassed to be in a Masters of the Universe movie. I think everyone walked into this knowing exactly who their characters were, and that sincerity and that seriousness goes a long way, especially when you see some of the funnier moments.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, shout out to Ram Man, Fisto, Mechaneck, that entire crew. Some really great laughs from them and from us
I
watching
feel
them.
like you're a Ram Man guy. You're a Ram Man
You know
guy.
what? I'm a Ram Man guy. There's some crazy jokes about.
I don't know. Like there's some
Ram Man
fisting
that I won't
the
spoil.
things that I think you'd be
There's some,
interested
there's some great fisting jokes. But let's talk about the humor in this movie. Let's talk about the story in this movie. I think it's pretty simple. I think kind of what I was saying at the top, like the idea of this entire franchise being pretty transparent, pretty, the bad guy's bad kind of thing. I think if you know anything about the story of He-Man, you could probably write out the plot for this movie without actually seeing it. But I think to what we've all been talking about, I think the confidence in what they're trying to do is really what pushes this forward. Darcy, I'll throw it to you. What did you think of the storyline without spoiling anything in this film?
Yeah, I mean, it's a conventional story, but there are conventions for a reason. Like you tell a story a certain way because it works. And again, while it's not breaking the book and you can again predict what's coming, I still enjoy the ride and the humor they packed into it. While not all of it was gut busting laughter, I still managed to chuckle at most of the jokes they landed for me. And again, I like these characters interacting with each other. It's just what was getting them from scene to scene necessarily wasn't the most engaging, I guess, of all. But again, that's not something I went into this movie expecting. I wasn't expecting the best storytelling from a Masters of the Universe movie. I just wanted to have a fun time, which is what I did. So I guess it worked for me. Yeah.
Justin.
Yeah, I hear you, Darce. I feel like I think the story was probably the weakest part for me. It follows, like we were saying, a very conventional fantasy adventure structure, and it doesn't offer many surprises along the way. You can very much sense and see some of these story beats like from a mile away. But what I think does work is the thematic focus on Adam. Like I think the movie goes the distance, and what makes He-Man worthy of his power is his heart, is his compassion, his leadership, and belief in others, and that to me was a really strong point, and the thing that really kind of held it all together for me. But the actual adventure of it all felt very conventional, and maybe it is a little bit of like, hey, we're riffing on old movies, so you might as well just keep it that way, because there's a lot of like that first little bit is very expositionally heavy, and I thought they could have maybe broken it up just a bit to kind of show us a bit of the past and present, and kind of move us around a little bit rather than just like dumping so much and then here you go. But then again, once you get into the 15-year jump, there's a lot that happens there. The humor is good, almost to a fault though, to a certain degree, because it's like some of the jokes really do land. Some of them are less like, that didn't need to be there. So it's a tough little balance, but the whole idea of the confidence, knowing what it's saying, having fun with itself, not taking itself seriously, it landed all those things. It landed all those things. And, again, focusing on Adam, it gives the film an emotional core that helps separate it from being just another fantasy blockbuster that has like this sort of archetypal hero. There's a strength there that is unique. And especially when we're talking about He-Man, this feels refreshingly different.
And I think I agree with all those points. I do think, we talked about some of the characters, most of the characters feeling like they were just kind of there to support the story of Adam. And again, as an origin story, I get it. I think this movie would have made a lot more sense had they just called it He-Man and not necessarily Masters of the Universe. Maybe we work our way towards Masters of the Universe because this is so centered on Adam that some of these other characters get lost. I think the pacing, definitely, there are moments, like you said, Darcy, where this movie slows down to a crawl. I do think that the movie for the most part, really does pick up in its second act, and I was kind of just waiting to be like, okay, let's go, let's do the thing. I made a lot of comparisons coming out of the theater, and I heard a lot of people talking about this. We all talked about it, of it feeling kind of like an early James Gunn, sort of approach, a gun light, if you will, and a gun like. But I think it was where the jokes, yes, a good amount of them made me chuckle. A good amount of them had some belly laughs coming out, but there were a few that were just like, that was so unnecessary. And then there were a few that I was like, if this just ended 10 seconds sooner, I think it would have gone over much better. Let's move on. Let's get on to the next thing. But yeah, it's simple. It's transparent. Bad guys bad. I don't think we need too much more of that. And I think it'll be interesting to see, though, how far that ideology can take them before they do have to start going a little bit deeper with certain things, and maybe borrowing from the Kevin Smith playbook of expanding these characters out just a little bit more. Again, I want to have fun with this. I want it to be goofy, but I don't want it to go so far goofy that it feels too much like parody by the time we're getting into a second or third film in this franchise. So I just, that would be my hope for future versions of the story for these movies.
I honestly think this should have just been a show, to be completely honest. And I know that we always flutter bit back and forth between that, because I think that you would have been able to justify the masters of the universe of it all, right? Helping to kind of draw out and maybe, not let characters just fall to the side. But again, this is a movie, so I understand that. And, a lot of the comparisons that we were hearing about James Gunn and the vibe, it is the needle drops. There is a lot of needle drops in this, right? And there is that idea. Like, we look at Suicide Squad that David Ayer did with Jared Leto, ironically, and that was a movie that was designed differently to be more of a crime thriller, but was re-edited so that it would be more like Guardians of the Galaxy, with more needle drops and more poppy fun, so that it would be almost like dark humor. So it could find its vibe, and that didn't work for them. But the idea that they would look at Guardians of the Galaxy and say, well, we should just do that. That's something that, as close as they did it to the time of that release, it didn't really work for them, right? Here, you can obviously say, well, there's been a significant amount of time between James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy and this film, but it definitely still plays or feels like a Guardians of the Galaxy style film, with this idea of the fantasy, the cosmic, the weird, the humor, and the immense amount of needle drops.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're trying to tell a story that's infused with the vibe of the 80s, including all the 80s soundtracks are going to make that happen. And unfortunately, that was done with Guardians of the Galaxy, because that's when Peter Quill was abducted. So it's the overlaps just have to, are coincidental.
He doesn't own it. That's for sure. Yeah,
no, it's going to happen. Needle drops were a thing before James Gunn appeared, and it just helps set the era. It's just unfortunate that the vibes, unfortunately, paint the Guardians picture.
Exactly, and to your point, it's just unfortunate that as it's already existed, because James Gunn's done it so well, it's now just been coined as like a James Gunn thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, that feels like a James Gunn movie, right? And I get it. I get it. He's done it. He did it in Superman to a certain degree as well for specific moments. But Guardians, like you said, the music was so key to the character. So and his establishment and his connection to Earth. So it was obviously fundamental in the movie. Here, it's obviously there really isn't any need for.
It's just for the viewers to drive
exactly.
The 80s vibe.
It's really just for the nostalgic vibes of this is a property or IP that was birthed in the 80s. Therefore, the needle drops need to come from that time frame. So, but yeah, getting sidetracked from it from all of this. But yeah, I think it's like it finds its own footing, even if it does feel familiar, if that makes sense.
There's a before James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, and there's an after James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's where we live right now. And I think, to your point, though, I think the needle drops, for me, that worked quite well. I just think some of the humor and pacing feels like some of the James Gunn that people,
it was too awkward. Some of it was too awkward. It was just like, didn't need that.
Bring it back a bit.
Yeah, awkward humor is great humor.
Let's get to our final thoughts, and we're gonna rate this film on a scale of 1 to 5. Talking green tigers. Darcy, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have very high expectations. I don't have a deep love for this franchise that has lasted for years. I'm very new to enjoying He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and this was a fun outing. Again, I didn't want anything more than to have a fun time, and I had just that. So while the story is conventional, the characters are really fun, and the actors bring them to life in a really exciting way. And then the sets and vibes of the '80s just really hit home for me. So yeah, this is it's not the best movie, but it's still an enjoyable movie. If you want a good dose of '80s nostalgia, go check it out. I'm giving this one 4 to 5 talking green tigers.
Very cool. Justin.
Nice. Yeah, like he said, Masters of the Universe isn't perfect. The CGI can be rough. The story leans heavily on familiar fantasy tropes, but what won me over was how much heart the film has. Embraces the weird, colorful world of Eternia, gives Adam more depth than I think we've seen before, which, is enough reason for this to be a movie. It features, good performances from, like we said, Jared Leto. Idris was great, and the whole cast was just great. They understood their role, and like we said, the score absolutely fantastic from Daniel Pemberton. I think most importantly, it's like Darcy said, this is a fun movie. It's the kind of movie that understands why people fell in love with these characters in the first place, while still trying to give them a little more emotional depth, and specifically He-Man. I walked away entertained, and honestly, I'd be happy to spend more time in this version of Eternia if they decide to continue the franchise in future stories. So yeah, I'm going to be giving this 3.5 out of 5 talking green tigers.
I'm right there next to you, though. I think, again, I keep saying I didn't have expectations. I guess I had a few expectations, but one of them was that I felt like I wanted this to be more Mortal Kombat 2 than Mortal Kombat 1 in terms of just its confidence, how it's taking itself, what it's covering. And it felt like that. It did feel more Mortal Kombat 2 than Mortal Kombat 1. I was laughing. We were there with a great fan-filled crowd of people. There were cosplayers in the crowd. There was some hooting. There was some hollering. There was some fist pumping.
There was some applauding, dude. There was some applauding. Fans loved it.
It was great. And I think that's always a great vibe to have. Again, the story is really simple. They know what they needed to do as an introduction and a reintroduction. I think this movie felt great for me and for us, not having too much information going into it. But I do, feel like there were some guys behind us in the theater, and they were chuckling at things that I'm like, in my head, I was going, oh, they're chuckling at that because they know that that's a reference to this probably in the 80s, or they're laughing at that because that's one of the toys that they had in their collection. Like they were, gentlemen of the 80s. It seemed like, and at least in terms of how they were laughing at so many different things that I was like, that was just going over my head. But no, I think this was great. The cast was great. I would have liked a little bit more from them from a writing standpoint, from their characters, but I think they all nailed the performances of their characters. I think without the music, this would be a 3 for me. But because of Daniel Pemberton and that hell yeah score, I'm going to give it a solid 3.5 out of 5. Talking green tigers. That said, I almost brought it back down to 3 because we need more Battle Cat. Just as an expectation. I know this is spoiler free. There's not enough Battle Cat in this movie. Not by a long shot. We need more Battle Cat. Please. That is it for our spoiler-free review for Masters of the Universe. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to share your thoughts on this movie or any of the movies we cover or series we cover, let me just have Justin grant you the power to reach us by imbuing you with the knowledge of Eternia.
Well, they can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. They can also find us on Twitter at GeekcentricYT or on Instagram and TikTok at wearegeekcentric.
Can you just say the last part again, just like a hero, though? Like a hero. Like, can you just...
Okay, let me do that again.
Yeah,
and they can reach us at wearegeekcentric. Is that better?
Wow. That was way better. Thank you.
Failed?
Thank you.
Okay.
Keep it. Should we keep this joke going as long as the joke's in the movie? Keep in mind, we have a ton of other great episodes covering the latest in movies and TV shows, including some of our spoiler-filled discussions for Marvel Television's Daredevil, Born Again Season 2, Star Wars Maul, Shadow Lord, and Invincible Season 4, as well as spoiler-free reviews for those series and spoiler-free reviews for the latest and greatest Spider Noir, Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and Project Hail Mary. Plus, we've got some great interviews to check out, like our recent interview with Oren Uziel, the showrunner of Spider Noir, where we discussed the 1930s films that influenced the series' incredible look, the classic noir storytelling, and what makes Spider Noir feel so different from traditional Spider-Man stories. Also, something a little different, we have a behind the convention-led conversation with some of the folks behind YetiCon, one of Ontario's most unique convention experiences. Justin spoke with director Brandon Forder, creative director Angela Forder, and chief strategy officer of cosplay and social community, Saphira Cosplay, about what attendees can expect at this revamped YetiCon taking place at Blue Mountain Village from June 19th to the 21st. So be sure to check out those interviews as well as all of our interviews either here on your podcast service of choice or over on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric. That is it for now. We are looking forward to more soon. Guys, are you feeling a bit sweaty yet? Because the hot geek summer, I know it's not officially summer yet according to the dates, Darcy, don't yell at me, but the hot geek summer is here. It feels like we are diving right into the summer movie season with a Steven Spielberg sci-fi movie coming up, Disclosure Day. We've got some coverage for Toy Story 5 on the way, a new Spider-Man movie, The Odyssey, so much coming up in the next month or so, and a lot of great and geeky things throughout the rest of the year. So we are Geekcentric, and you can be too. Darcy, Justin, thank you so much for joining me for this He-Manly spoiler-free review. And as we say, love ya.
Laters.
Peace.